Get down! Commander Vrykol's roar cracked like a thunderbolt, his voice cutting through the chaos as the canyon lit up with bursts of laser fire. The sharp hiss of a plasma discharge sizzled past his ear, slamming into the rock face behind him, scattering shards of molten stone. He pressed himself against the jagged wall, his second pair of hands gripping the coarse edge while his primary arms leveled a plasma carbine. The air was thick with the tang of scorched minerals and the sharp metallic sting of overheating weaponry. "Where is it coming from?" shouted Vrykol, the squad's jittery comms technician, his green-scaled tail lashing nervously against the dirt. His voice quavered, barely audible over the sporadic crack of distant fire. "It's not it," Vrykol growled, his amber eyes narrowing as he scanned the opposite ridge. "It's him." A human Drevok's clawed fingers twitched on his heads-up display, cycling through distorted thermal readouts and pulse signatures. "That's impossible! Nothing's showing up. No movement, no—" Another sharp crack split the air, a sound so alien to the Zynixians that it sent a shiver through their ranks. It wasn't the whining pitch of energy weapons or the rumbling hiss of particle beams. It was sharp, unrelenting, like the strike of a hammer against steel. A cry erupted as a soldier to Vrykol's left stumbled, their chest plate collapsing inward with a spray of dark, viscous blood. "Sniper!" Vrykol barked, forcing his squad into motion. "Break formation! Find cover!" The Zynixians scattered, their iridescent armor catching the dim light of the canyon's twin suns. Shadows stretched long across the terrain, their shifting patterns playing tricks on even the sharpest of eyes. The terrain worked against them, with jagged outcroppings and narrow ledges funneling their movements into predictable paths. The sniper had chosen the battlefield with surgical intent. Vrykol's eyes darted to Zintra, his tactical officer, who crouched behind an outcropping just within earshot. Her silver-tipped antennae trembled as she assessed the chaos, her sharp features set with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "This can't be one human," she hissed, her taloned fingers tapping against her pulse rifle. "They don't have this kind of accuracy. It's not accuracy," Vrykol interrupted, his tone harsh. "It's adaptation." Zintra opened her mouth to argue, but stopped as another shot rang out, echoing like a whisper of death. A second soldier crumpled to the ground, the impact shattering their reinforced leg guards like brittle glass. The squad's morale was unraveling, their panicked breaths and frantic footsteps filling the air like a dissonant melody. "Commander!" Drevok called out, his voice laced with panic. "We need to pull back. This position is suicide." "No," Vrykol snarled, his mandibles clicking as he adjusted the heads-up display on his wrist. A holographic projection of the canyon flickered to life, its glowing topography riddled with red warning indicators. "We're not running from a single human. We're Zynixian. We adapt, remember?" The words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Vrykol's chest tightened as his sharp gaze swept across the canyon. Every movement, every flicker of light could be a trick. The sniper wasn't just killing, they were dismantling. The loss of 2 soldiers wasn't about numbers, it was about control. The human was shaping the battlefield, narrowing their options with each calculated strike. "Drevok," Vrykol ordered, his tone brooking no argument. "Deploy aerial drones. We need eyes on that ridge." Drevok's scaled hands fumbled over his controls, launching 3 sleek drones into the fading light. They buzzed upward, their tiny rotors slicing through the still air. Heads tilted skyward, the squad watched as the drones climbed toward the sniper's supposed position. For a moment, hope flickered. Then, with a deafening crack, one of the drones burst into a spray of sparks and shrapnel. The second followed a heartbeat later, its smoking remains spiraling into the canyon below. The third managed a single pass before the sniper's weapon silenced it mid-flight. The squad's collective breath hitched. Even Zintra's confidence wavered, her grip tightening on her rifle. "How?" she muttered, her voice barely audible. "How can they—" "They're predicting us," Vrykol said, his tone grim. He could feel the sniper's unseen gaze, as though the human was dissecting his every move. It wasn't just a fight, it was a lesson, and the sniper was teaching them their own weaknesses. Another shot rang out, but this time, it wasn't random. The sniper's target was Drevok's comm station, its delicate array exploding in a shower of molten circuitry. The squad's tactical readouts vanished, leaving them blind and vulnerable. Vrykol's 4 hands clenched into fists. Enough! Zintra, flank left with a detachment. Draw their fire. I'll lead the main force up the center. Her antennae twitched in protest. You're walking into a trap. We're already in one, Vrykol shot back. I need you to keep them occupied while we close the gap. If we get close enough, you think blades will save us against this? Zintra's voice rose, her fear breaking through her veneer of professionalism. Vrykol stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, cutting tone. We're Zynixians. This is what we do. Now move. Zintra hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding sharply. She motioned to a group of soldiers and disappeared into the shadows, her movements swift and deliberate. Vrykol turned to the remaining squad, their eyes reflecting a mixture of terror and resolve. On me, he ordered, his voice steady. We move fast, and we move smart. No hesitation. Stay low, and keep your optics forward. The squad nodded, their fear giving way to a grim determination. They moved as one, their boots crunching against the gravel as they advanced. The canyon seemed to close in around them, the weight of the sniper's presence pressing against their minds. The next shot came, but it didn't hit flesh. It struck a rock a meter to Vrykol's right, sending a spray of sharp fragments into the air. The sniper was toying with them now, forcing them to slow, to question every step. Vrykol gritted his teeth, his jaw aching from the strain. The human wasn't just a killer, they were an artist, and the battlefield was their canvas. Every shot, every movement was part of a larger masterpiece, one that Vrykol couldn't yet comprehend. And then, just as they reached the base of the ridge, he saw it, a glint of metal against the setting sun. For a fleeting moment the sniper came into view, a figure cloaked in the natural colors of the terrain, their rifle held with an ease that spoke of unshakable confidence. They were gone a second later, disappearing into the rocks like a ghost. But the image burned itself into Vrykol's mind, a chilling reminder of what they were up against. As the squad pressed forward, the commander's thoughts churned. This was no ordinary human. This was something else entirely. Pray we never meet another like him, Vrykol muttered under his breath, the words barely audible. But deep down he knew his prayer wouldn't be answered. Vrykol crouched low, his fingers brushing the coarse grit of the canyon floor. The metallic taste of adrenaline lingered on his tongue as he scanned the ridge ahead. His squad clustered behind him, their eyes darting toward every shadow, every flicker of movement that might betray their phantom adversary. The sniper's silhouette had been a fleeting glimpse, but its presence was carved into their minds like a scar. The air was dense, heavy with the metallic tang of burnt plasma and the distant echoes of alien wildlife. Vrykol's nostrils flared as he steadied his breath, his gaze fixed on the jagged rocks above. We're exposed here, he said, his voice low, the words barely breaking the tension that gripped the group. Drevok, scan for alternate routes. Zintra, report. Static hissed through his heads-up display as Zintra's voice crackled into clarity. No visual on the sniper. My team's moving parallel to your position, but the ridge is a maze. It's like this bastard knows every crevice before we do. Vrykol's jaw tightened. She wasn't wrong. The sniper had an uncanny ability to shape the battlefield, turning their every move into a calculated risk. He motioned for the squad to spread out, their movements careful, deliberate. The crunch of boots against gravel and the soft whir of tactical servos seemed unbearably loud against the canyon stillness. Drevok's scanners blinked red, a dull pulse that illuminated the dirt-streaked edges of his interface. No heat signatures, he muttered, his voice brittle. No trace of movement. It's like they're not even here. Wrong, Vrykol snapped, his eyes narrowing. They're here, watching, waiting. The sniper's attacks had been more than precise. They were psychological warfare. Each shot wasn't just a kill, it was a statement. Vrykol's mind raced as he tried to decipher the patterns. The sniper wasn't aiming to annihilate them in one fell swoop. Instead, they were dismantling the squad piece by piece, letting fear burrow into their ranks like a parasite. Zintra's voice crackled again. Commander, This ridge, something's not right. It's too quiet. No wildlife, no wind. It's like the whole area's holding its breath. Vrykol felt it too. A stillness that pressed down on him, heavy and unyielding, as though the canyon itself conspired to keep them trapped. The twin suns had dipped lower, casting jagged shadows that stretched like clawed hands across the terrain. Each shadow felt alive, a potential hiding place for the sniper's unseen barrel. "Keep moving," he ordered, his tone sharp, "and watch your corners. No unnecessary noise." The squad advanced, their formation tight but tense. Vrykol could sense the fear in their movements, the slight hesitation in their steps, the way their fingers hovered just a moment too long on their triggers. Fear was a toxin, and the sniper had turned it into a weapon more potent than any plasma rifle. A sharp crack split the air, and Vrykol barely had time to react before a chunk of rock exploded inches from his head, the fragments peppering his armor with stinging bites. "Cover!" he barked, diving behind an outcropping. The squad scattered, each soldier finding what little protection the terrain offered. "South Ridge!" Zintra's voice snapped through the comms. "I've got movement, but damn it, it's gone. They're playing us." Vrykol gritted his teeth, his mandibles clicking softly in frustration. The sniper's shot hadn't been a kill. It had been a warning, a reminder of their vulnerability. He adjusted the settings on his heads-up display, overlaying a thermal map onto the rugged terrain. The scanner painted the world in gradients of red and blue, but the sniper's position remained an empty void. "They're not just hiding," Vrykol muttered to himself. "They're baiting us." Drevok crouched beside him, his scales glistening with sweat despite the canyon's dry chill. "Commander, this is suicide. We're fighting a ghost." Vrykol turned to him, his amber eyes burning with a mixture of resolve and frustration. "Number, we're fighting a human, and humans aren't ghosts. They're flesh and blood. They make mistakes." As if to mock him, another shot rang out, this time striking the drone support unit strapped to a soldier's back. The unit sparked and whined before collapsing in a shower of useless components. Vrykol's fists clenched. The sniper wasn't just killing, they were cutting off every advantage, every lifeline the squad had left. Zintra's voice cut through the tension. "Commander, I've got an idea. We're not going to outgun this bastard, but we might be able to outsmart him." "Speak," Vrykol said curtly, his mind already racing with possibilities. "The sniper's using the terrain against us, right? They've got the high ground, the shadows, the element of surprise. But what if we flip the board?" Vrykol frowned. "You're suggesting we force them into open terrain?" "Exactly," Zintra replied. "We've got seismic charges. If we plant them along the ridge, we might be able to collapse their cover, level the playing field." It was a risk, a dangerous one. The charges could destabilize the entire area, burying them along with the sniper. But Vrykol knew hesitation would only get them killed. "Do it," he said, his voice hard. "But make it fast. Every second we delay is another second they use against us." Zintra's team moved into position, their silhouettes darting through the shadows like wraiths. Vrykol's squad held their ground, their weapons trained on the ridge as they waited for the inevitable retaliation. The tension was a living thing, coiling tighter with every heartbeat. A sudden movement caught Vrykol's eye, a flicker of motion on the ridge. He raised his carbine, his finger hovering over the trigger. But the figure vanished before he could fire, leaving only the ghostly imprint of a shadow on his thermal display. The ground beneath him trembled as Zintra's charges detonated, the explosion ripping through the ridge with a deafening roar. Rock and dust filled the air, the shockwave rattling Vrykol's teeth as he shielded his face. When the dust cleared, the ridge had transformed into a jagged wasteland, its once solid structure reduced to a chaotic maze of debris. For a moment, there was silence, true silence, thick and suffocating. Then a single, deliberate shot rang out, cutting through the air like a blade. One of Zintra's soldiers collapsed, their body crumpling against the rubble. "Damn it!" Zintra's voice broke through the comms, laced with frustration. "He's still alive, still moving." Vrykol's heart sank. The sniper hadn't just survived, they'd adapted. His grip tightened on his weapon as he surveyed the ruined ridge, his mind racing. The human wasn't just a soldier. They were a predator, and the squad was still their prey. "We're running out of options," Drevok said quietly, his voice trembling. "No," Vrykol replied, his tone cold and unwavering. "We're just starting to understand them, and that's more dangerous than any weapon they have." The sniper's next move was a mystery, but one thing was clear. This was no ordinary battle. It was a game of wits, and the human was playing a long game. Vrykol just had to make sure they didn't lose before they had a chance to fight back. The acrid taste of dust clung to Vrykol's tongue as he crouched behind the fractured remains of a boulder, his breathing steady but shallow. The ridge lay in ruins, a scar of jagged stone and loose debris stretching into the shadows of the canyon. The seismic charges had done their job, too well perhaps, but the sniper remained alive. Worse still, the collapse had given the human even more cover to exploit. Zintra's voice crackled through his heads-up display, her tone clipped with frustration. "Charges bought us nothing but rubble, Commander. Whoever this is, they're not just surviving, they're thriving. I don't know how long we can keep this up." Vrykol's gaze remained fixed on the rubble-strewn ridge. He felt the sniper's presence, a weight in the air that pressed against his instincts. "We keep going," he replied, his voice low but resolute. "Every move they make, every shot they fire, we learn something. We'll turn their own tactics against them." A flicker of motion caught his eye, a glint of light no more than a heartbeat's worth of movement on the far ridge. He tensed, raising his carbine, but the figure vanished into the labyrinth of rock before he could take aim. It wasn't the first time the sniper had revealed themselves, just enough to sow doubt and hesitation. Nearby, Drevok muttered under his breath, his clawed fingers fumbling with a portable scanner. "This is insane. We're fighting a ghost with a rifle. They're playing us like a game." "Then we change the rules," Vrykol snapped, his tone sharp enough to cut through Drevok's fear. "We're not the prey here. They are." The air was dry and heavy, thick with the mineral tang of pulverized stone. Each step the squad took sent echoes through the canyon, the crunch of boots on gravel betraying their every move. Vrykol gestured for the group to spread out, their armor glinting faintly in the fading light of the twin suns. Shadows stretched long across the terrain, pooling in crevices and casting jagged silhouettes across the walls. "Commander," Zintra called from her position, her voice tense, "we're not equipped for this kind of fight. Long range isn't our strength, and you know it." Vrykol glanced over his shoulder at her, the hard set of his jaw betraying his own doubts. "You think I don't know that? This isn't about what we're equipped for. It's about what we're capable of." The squad pressed on, their movements deliberate but wary. The sniper had stopped firing for now, but the silence wasn't a reprieve. It was a warning. Vrykol knew the human was still out there, watching, calculating. He could feel the weight of their gaze, like a predator sizing up its prey. Zintra knelt beside a shattered piece of armor, her sharp eyes narrowing as she examined it. "Commander, look at this." She held up a fragment, its edges blackened and warped. "Standard Zynixian plating. But this," she pointed to the clean puncture through its center, "this isn't plasma or energy-based. It's kinetic." Vrykol's mandibles clicked softly as he studied the fragment. A kinetic weapon. The concept was ancient, almost laughably outdated by Zynixian standards, but the results were undeniable. Kinetic rounds didn't leave heat signatures, didn't disrupt energy fields. They cut through defenses like a knife through flesh. "It's not the weapon," Vrykol muttered, his mind racing. "It's how they're using it. Every shot is calculated, not to kill but to dismantle." Drevok let out a bitter laugh, his tail flicking nervously. "Calculated? More like cursed. This isn't just strategy, it's like they know what we're thinking before we do." "Enough," Vrykol said sharply, cutting off the spiraling fear before it could take root. "We're not going to sit here and wait to be picked off. Zintra, do you have those motion trackers?" She nodded, pulling a small device from her belt. The tracker emitted a soft pulse, sending waves across the terrain. Vrykol watched as the heads-up display mapped the area, revealing every crack and crevice. The sniper's position was still a void, a black hole in the data, but it gave them a starting point. "Move out," Vrykol ordered, his voice steady. "Stay low, stay quiet. We flush them out, one way or another. The squad moved like shadows, their forms blending with the jagged terrain. The air grew colder as the twin suns sank lower, the temperature shift biting against their exposed skin. Vrykol's eyes darted across the landscape, scanning for any sign of movement. The silence pressed in around them, broken only by the soft crunch of gravel beneath their boots. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the canyon, followed by a burst of sparks as a pulse shield overloaded. A soldier stumbled, clutching their shoulder as the kinetic round ricocheted into the dirt. Vrykol dropped to one knee, his carbine trained on the direction of the shot. "South Ridge!" Zintra shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "They're on the move!" Vrykol's squad shifted, their weapons trained on the ridge. The sniper's figure appeared again, a fleeting silhouette against the rocks. They moved with inhuman fluidity, their form blending seamlessly with the terrain. Vrykol fired. His carbines burst, illuminating the darkness, but the sniper was already gone. "They're leading us!" Drevok yelled, panic creeping into his voice. "We're walking into their trap!" Vrykol's jaw tightened as he assessed the situation. The sniper wasn't just evading. They were steering the squad, manipulating their movements. He adjusted his heads-up display, marking potential ambush points on the map. "Zintra, take your team and circle around. Cut off their escape route," Vrykol commanded. "Drevok, stay on the scanners. I want eyes on every shadow." As Zintra's team moved into position, Vrykol advanced with the remaining squad. The sniper's trail was faint but deliberate, a breadcrumb trail of misdirection. Every step felt like a gamble, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. The canyon narrowed, the walls closing in as the terrain became more treacherous. Vrykol's claws scraped against the jagged stone, his senses heightened to every sound, every flicker of movement. The sniper was close. He could feel it. And then, as they rounded a corner, they found it. A makeshift nest carved into the rock, the remnants of a kinetic rifle still smoldering on the ground. It was a decoy, a ghost of the sniper's presence, left behind to mislead them. "Commander!" Drevok's voice broke through the comms, his tone urgent. "I've got movement, North Ridge, above your position. It's them." Vrykol's blood burned as he turned, his carbine already trained on the ridge. The sniper stood there, silhouetted against the faint glow of the dying suns. They raised their rifle, the barrel glinting like a predator's eye. But this time, Vrykol didn't hesitate. He fired, the plasma bolt streaking toward the figure, but the sniper was already gone, their form dissolving into the shadows. As the echoes of the shot faded, Vrykol's heart pounded in his chest. The sniper wasn't just an opponent. They were a shadow, a phantom that slipped through his grasp at every turn. And as he stared at the ridge, the weight of their presence settled over him like a shroud. This wasn't just a battle. It was a test. And Vrykol couldn't shake the feeling that he was already failing. The ridge loomed above them, its jagged outline clawing at the dimming horizon. The sniper's shadow lingered in Vrykol's mind like an unspoken threat, every step forward dragging a new question into his thoughts. The figure had vanished yet again, slipping into the depths of the canyon's labyrinthine terrain, as if the rocks themselves had swallowed them whole. Vrykol's clawed hand tightened on his carbine, the metallic grip slick with sweat. His squad trailed behind, their movements cautious and deliberate, boots crunching against the loose gravel that threatened to betray their presence. The canyon air was sharp and biting, carrying with it the faint sting of mineral dust, a dry and abrasive sensation against his throat with every breath. "This place is a maze," Drevok muttered, his tail swishing anxiously behind him as his eyes scanned the shifting shadows. "Every corner feels like it's closing in." "It's not the rocks closing in," Vrykol replied without turning, his voice low but cutting. "It's them. They're forcing us into their game, step by step." The silence around them felt alive, each sound amplified and distorted as it echoed off the canyon walls. The soft scrape of a claw on stone, the faint rustle of fabric as a soldier adjusted their weapon. Each noise seemed to carry an unnatural weight, hanging in the air like a warning. Zintra's voice crackled into his heads-up display, sharp and urgent. "Commander, I've swept the North Ridge. No sign of movement, but there's something off. I found markings etched into the rock, Symbols. They're human, but ancient, primitive. Vrykol paused, his mandibles clicking softly in thought. Symbols. A message, perhaps? Or a taunt? His grip on the carbine tightened as his eyes traced the fractured terrain ahead. "Send me an image," he ordered, his voice steady despite the churn of unease in his chest. A moment later, his display lit up with the symbols Zintra had discovered. Crude lines carved deep into the rock, their shapes jagged and deliberate. They resembled old Earth war emblems, the kind humans used before their technology caught up with the galaxy's standards. But there was something more to them, something unsettling in their stark simplicity. "What do you think it means?" Drevok asked, his voice quieter now, almost reverent. Vrykol studied the symbols, the carved lines stark against the dark stone. "It's a warning," he said finally, his tone grim. "They're telling us we're not welcome here." Before Drevok could respond, a sudden piercing crack shattered the stillness. The sound was raw and violent, the unmistakable strike of a kinetic round tearing through the air. Vrykol ducked instinctively, his eyes snapping to the ridge above. The sniper had fired, but not at them. A boulder just ahead exploded into fragments, the force scattering sharp shards of rock that whistled past Vrykol's head. "Get down!" he barked, dropping low as the squad scrambled for cover. The canyon erupted into chaos, each soldier diving behind what little protection the fractured terrain offered. The sniper's position was still unclear, the echoes of the shot ricocheting off the walls and concealing the true direction. Zintra's voice was in his ear again, urgent and breathless. "They're hurting us, Commander. The shot wasn't to kill. It was to push us somewhere." "I know," Vrykol growled, his amber eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. The sniper wasn't hunting them. They were maneuvering them, corralling the squad into a corner where escape would be impossible. His eyes darted to the map overlay on his display. The canyon narrowed ahead, the walls forming a tight choke point that offered no cover. It was a death trap. "Pull back," he ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "We're not walking into that." "Too late," Drevok shouted, his scanner lighting up with red warnings. "Movement on the flanks, both sides." The sniper had anticipated their retreat. Shapes moved in the periphery, flickers of motion too fast to track. Vrykol's pulse quickened as he realized the truth. The sniper wasn't working alone. They had support, a shadowy force that had remained hidden until now. "Ambush!" Vrykol barked, his carbine snapping up as he fired into the advancing shadows. The canyon erupted into a cacophony of light and sound, plasma bolts streaking across the darkness as the squad fought to hold their ground. The enemy was fast, their movements fluid and unpredictable. Each figure was cloaked in a shroud of camouflage that flickered and shifted, blending seamlessly with the rocks. Drevok cursed as his weapon overheated, the barrel glowing faintly before sputtering out. "Who are these people? They're not Zynixian. They're not like anything we've fought before." "They're human," Vrykol said grimly, his tone heavy with understanding. "Or what's left of them." Zintra's voice cut through the chaos, her tone sharp and commanding. "Commander, we need a fallback point. We can't hold this position." Vrykol's mind raced as he assessed their dwindling options. The canyon walls were too steep to climb, and the choke point ahead was still a trap. His gaze fell on a narrow crevice to their left, a gap barely wide enough for a single soldier to squeeze through. "There!" he shouted, motioning toward the crevice. "Through the gap! Move!" The squad fell back, their movements frantic but disciplined as they fired suppressive shots to cover their retreat. Vrykol was the last to move, his carbine spitting plasma at the advancing shadows until he slipped into the crevice behind his team. The air inside was cold and stale, the narrow walls pressing in on either side. The squad huddled close, their breaths coming in sharp, uneven bursts. Drevok's scales shimmered with tension as he checked his weapon, his claws trembling. "Commander," Zintra said, her voice quieter now, but no less urgent, "this isn't a fight we can win. Not like this." Vrykol leaned against the rough stone, his eyes closed for a brief moment as he gathered his thoughts. The sniper had forced their hand, driven them into a corner where every advantage belonged to the enemy. And yet, there was a part of him that refused to yield, a fire that burned hotter with every loss. "We're not beaten," he said finally, his voice steady and unyielding. "Not yet." Vrykol glanced at him, doubt flickering in his eyes. "What are we supposed to do? They're outmaneuvering us at every turn." Vrykol's gaze hardened, his mandibles clicking softly. "We do what they don't expect. We stop running, we stop reacting, and we take the fight to them." The squad stared at him, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and resolve. The canyon was still, the echoes of the battle fading into silence once more. But in that silence, Vrykol felt the weight of what lay ahead. The sniper was still out there, watching, waiting. And this time, the game was far from over. The air inside the crevice was thick with tension, the faint mineral tang of the canyon walls coating Vrykol's tongue. His squad stood in uneasy silence, their faces shadowed by the dim light filtering through the jagged opening. The muffled echoes of distant footsteps suggested their attackers hadn't fully withdrawn, yet there was no mistaking it. They were being hunted. Vrykol tightened his grip on his carbine, its metallic surface cold and solid against his palm. He could feel the weight of his squad's eyes on him, their unspoken doubts pressing as heavily as the stone above them. Vrykol knelt a few steps away, his claws deftly recalibrating a broken scanner. Sparks flickered briefly before the device sputtered back to life. "Anything?" Vrykol asked, his voice low, almost a growl. Vrykol shook his head, frustration tightening his features. "The interference is everywhere. It's like the canyon itself is blocking our signals. Whoever they are, they've planned for this terrain." Zintra stepped closer, her breath steady despite the streak of blood on her cheek, a glancing hit from the chaos earlier. "Commander, we can't stay here. They know we're cornered. It's only a matter of time before they flush us out." Vrykol scanned the crevice, his sharp eyes tracing every crack and shadow. She was right. The narrow passage offered little protection, and worse, it limited their mobility. They couldn't wait for the enemy to strike again. They had to move first. His thoughts churned, the echoes of every ambush and misstep replaying in his mind. "We go deeper," he decided, pointing toward the winding path ahead. "We use the terrain against them this time, force them to come after us." Zintra's antennae twitched, her expression unreadable. "You're gambling." "Not gambling," Vrykol corrected, his mandibles clicking softly. "Adaptation." The squad moved in silence, their steps careful and deliberate. The deeper they ventured, the colder the air grew, the canyon walls narrowing until they could only advance single file. Vrykol took the lead, his senses sharp as he scanned for traps or signs of pursuit. The faint sound of dripping water echoed faintly, the rhythmic plinks an eerie counterpoint to their tension. Vrykol spoke softly behind him, his voice tinged with unease. "Commander, you ever think this isn't about us winning? That they're playing a game we don't even understand?" Vrykol didn't answer immediately, his focus split between his surroundings and the question gnawing at his mind. What was the sniper's endgame? Every move, every strike had been too deliberate, too methodical to be mere coincidence. The symbols on the ridge, the precise strikes to their equipment, the manipulation of their movements, it was more than a battle. It was a message. "We understand enough," he said finally, his tone firm. "They bleed like we do. That's all we need to know." As if in answer, a sudden crack split the stillness. The squad froze, their weapons snapping up as their eyes darted toward the source. The sound had come from ahead, a rock dislodged from the ledge above, tumbling noisily to the ground. Vrykol motioned for silence, his hand raised as he stepped forward. The passage opened into a wider chamber, its floor littered with debris and broken stalagmites. The air here carried a metallic tang, a faint hint of something recent. Vrykol's gaze swept the room, his carbine raised, but the shadows seemed alive, shifting and blending with the jagged terrain. "They're here," Zintra whispered, her grip tightening on her weapon. "I can feel it." Vrykol's eyes narrowed as he caught a glint of light, a reflection off something metallic, half hidden behind a cluster of rocks. He signaled to the squad, and they spread out, their movements fluid and disciplined. The tension was electric, every step a gamble against the unseen enemy. A shot rang out, shattering the silence. The kinetic round ricocheted off a boulder inches from Vrykol's head, the impact sending shards of rock flying. He dropped to one knee, firing into the shadows as the squad followed suit. The chamber erupted in chaos, plasma bolts illuminating the darkness in brief, searing flashes. "Flank them!" Vrykol barked, his voice cutting through the cacophony. "Pin them down!" Zintra moved swiftly, her form a blur as she darted toward the left. Vrykol followed, his scanner whirring as it struggled to lock onto the sniper's position. The enemy's movements were impossibly fluid, their form shifting like a phantom as they weaved through the chaos. And then, for the first time, Vrykol saw them clearly. The sniper was no longer a fleeting shadow, but a figure of flesh and blood, their movements precise, yet unnervingly human. Clad in rugged armor streaked with the dust of the canyon, their weapon was an amalgamation of human ingenuity and salvaged alien technology. They moved with an eerie grace, their rifle firing with deadly intent. "Now!" Vrykol roared, seizing the moment as Zintra's team closed the gap. The sniper turned, their weapons snapping toward her, but Vryk's shot struck first, the plasma bolt catching the sniper's shoulder and sending them stumbling. Vrykol surged forward, closing the distance as the sniper scrambled to recover. The world seemed to narrow, every sound fading into the background as his focus honed in on the figure before him. His carbine was raised, his finger on the trigger, but the sniper moved faster. A flash of light erupted as the sniper activated a hidden device, a blinding pulse that forced Vrykol to shield his eyes. When the light faded, the chamber was empty save for the echoes of the conflict. The sniper was gone. Vrykol approached cautiously, his weapon raised. "They're toying with us. No one escapes like that unless they want us to see them." Vrykol's mandibles clicked in frustration, his grip tightening on his carbine. The sniper had left something behind, a small metallic cylinder embedded in the ground where they had stood. He knelt, studying it carefully. It wasn't a trap or a weapon, but a data capsule, its surface etched with the same symbols Zintra had discovered earlier. "What is it?" Zintra asked, her voice wary. Vrykol's eyes remained fixed on the capsule, his mind racing. "A message," he said, his tone grim. "But for who? Us or someone else?" As he pocketed the capsule, a faint vibration coursed through the ground beneath them, a subtle warning of what was to come. The sniper wasn't done. They were leading them deeper into the labyrinth, each step a calculated move in a game that Vrykol couldn't fully comprehend. "We're not done here," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the unknown. "This isn't just a fight. It's a test, and if we fail, it won't end with us." The squad exchanged uneasy glances, the mystery deepening with every step. As they moved forward, the shadows seemed to stretch longer, the silence heavier. Whatever lay ahead, it would be far worse than what they had faced so far. And Vrykol knew they were running out of time. The data capsule felt heavier in Vrykol's hand than it had any right to be. Its cold surface hummed faintly with latent energy, a subtle vibration that sent an uneasy shiver up his arm. The symbols etched along its casing pulsed in faint rhythmic patterns, their glow casting eerie streaks against the rough walls of the canyon. Whatever this message contained, it wasn't just a clue. It was a challenge, an unspoken dare to keep moving deeper into the labyrinth. Vryk's voice broke the silence, his breath uneven. "You think it's a trap? Feels like it's screaming, 'Open me!'" "It's bait," Zintra muttered, her sharp gaze flicking between Vrykol and the device. "But it's also information. They've been 3 steps ahead this entire time. Maybe this is how they stay ahead." Vrykol turned the capsule in his palm, his claws tracing its intricate patterns. "We don't have a choice," he said, his voice quieter now, like the canyon walls themselves were listening. "If we're going to outmaneuver them, we need to understand their game." He tapped the capsule's activation node, and it hissed open with a faint metallic sigh. A holographic laser plasma display flickered to life, its jagged lines and shifting images casting harsh light across their strained faces. The projection showed a map, an intricate web of the canyon system, each tunnel and crevice marked with ominous red indicators. At the center of the map, a glowing symbol pulsed, a human insignia, unmistakably ancient. Surrounding it were other markers, alien in design but disturbingly familiar. Vrykol's jaw tightened. These were strategic positions, mapped with surgical efficiency, each one showing traces of past battles. Vrykol leaned closer, his claws hovering over the display as though afraid to disturb it. "This isn't just a map," he murmured. "It's a record. Every engagement, every ambush, they've been tracking us. Not just today, but for weeks, maybe longer." Vrykol's mandibles clicked softly as he studied the map. The sniper's movements weren't random. They'd been orchestrating every step, pushing the squad toward this point. He could almost feel the sniper's presence in the patterns, their mind laid bare in the cruel logic of the terrain. "Commander," Zintra said, her tone cutting through the rising tension. "Look here." Her taloned finger pointed to the map's edges, where faint lines extended beyond the canyon walls. These weren't natural formations. They were artificial. Tunnels, deliberately carved and hidden. And at the far end of one tunnel was another marker, a glowing point that pulsed like a heartbeat. "That's their extraction point," Vrykol said, his voice steady but cold. "They've been leading us here, keeping us distracted while they prepare their exit." "Then we go after them," Zintra replied, already checking her weapon. "Cut them off before they can disappear again." "Not yet," Vrykol said, his amber eyes narrowing. "They're expecting us to follow the direct route. That's the trap. We take the tunnels." Vrykol frowned, his tail flicking nervously. The tunnels could be worse. Narrow spaces, limited visibility. They could pick us off even easier in there. "That's the risk," Vrykol admitted, his gaze fixed on the map. "But if we stay out here, we'll lose them for good. They know the terrain better than we do. The tunnels are our only chance to level the field." Zintra's expression was unreadable, her antennae twitching in thought. After a moment, she nodded. "Then we move now." The squad descended into the tunnels, their boots crunching softly against the uneven stone. The air grew cooler, carrying a dampness that clung to their skin and chilled their armor. The faint echoes of dripping water and distant vibrations seemed to follow them, a constant reminder that the sniper was never far away. Vrykol led the way, his carbine raised and ready. The tunnel walls closed in around them, their jagged surfaces brushing against his shoulders with each step. Shadows flickered along the edges of his vision, twisting and shifting with every movement of his heads-up display. "This feels wrong," Vrykol whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of their footsteps. "Like we're walking straight into their den." "Good," Vrykol replied without looking back. "Let them think we're predictable." The tunnel opened suddenly into a cavernous chamber, its ceiling arching high above them and glittering with mineral deposits that caught the light from their weapons. Pools of stagnant water dotted the floor, their surfaces rippling faintly as though something moved beneath them. Zintra knelt beside one of the pools, her sharp eyes scanning its depths. "This place was mined," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Decades ago, maybe longer. Humans were here before the canyon swallowed it." Vrykol's gaze swept the chamber, his instincts prickling. The sniper had chosen this route for a reason. Every detail, every step had been calculated. He motioned for the squad to spread out, their movements careful as they searched for signs of the enemy. It didn't take long. A faint trail of blood marked the ground, droplets smeared across the rocks leading deeper into the chamber. The sniper had been here, and they were injured. "They're slowing down," Zintra said, her voice tinged with satisfaction. "We've got them cornered." "Or they want us to think that," Vrykol countered, his tone hard. "Stay sharp." The trail led to another tunnel, narrower this time, its walls marked with claw-like gouges that hinted at the violence that had shaped this place. The squad moved single file, their weapons ready, their senses heightened. Every step felt heavier, the air thicker with anticipation. And then, the tunnel opened again, into a space that wasn't natural. The walls were smooth, polished metal, lined with faintly glowing conduits that pulsed in rhythm with the faint vibrations beneath their feet. Vryk's eyes widened as he took in the sight. "This isn't human. This is Zynixian tech." Vrykol's mind raced as he pieced it together. The sniper hadn't just been leading them through the canyon. They'd been leading them here, to something buried, hidden beneath the surface. And if this was Zynixian technology, it meant the sniper knew more about their kind than Vrykol had thought possible. "This isn't over," Vrykol said, his voice cold with resolve. "This is just the beginning." As the squad stepped deeper into the alien structure, the faint sound of movement echoed ahead. Subtle, deliberate. The sniper was still out there waiting, watching, and Vrykol knew the next move would decide everything. The metallic walls shimmered faintly, reflecting the squad's cautious movements as they descended deeper into the ancient Zynixian structure. The air felt heavier here, carrying a subtle, almost electric tension. Vrykol's carbine was raised, his amber eyes scanning every corner as his squad moved in tense silence behind him. The faint pulse of conduits along the walls created shifting patterns of light, enough to distort shadows and toy with their nerves. Zintra's voice broke the quiet, clipped and wary. "This place, it's too clean to be abandoned. The systems are active. Someone's been here recently." "Not someone," Vrykol corrected, his tone cold. "Them. This is where they've been leading us." The sniper's strategy was painfully clear now. Every step, every encounter had been designed to funnel them into this space. The Zynixian commander's mind churned as he tried to decipher the next layer of the human's plan. The sniper had outmaneuvered them at every turn, using terrain and psychology as weapons. Here, in the artificial corridors of his own kind's making, Vrykol knew the stakes had shifted again. Drevok crouched near the base of one glowing conduit, his claws skimming the smooth surface. "Commander, these systems are still connected to a power grid. It's old, but functional. I can patch in and map the layout, maybe even track movement." "Do it!" Vrykol ordered, his voice a low growl. "We need every advantage we can get." As Drevok worked, Vrykol motioned for Zintra to join him. She approached with measured steps, her sharp gaze darting between the shadows. "What's the plan, Commander?" "We can't keep chasing them. We need to turn this around." Vrykol nodded, his mandibles clicking softly as he studied the corridor ahead. "They've brought us here for a reason. They're not running, they're preparing. We don't have time to wait for them to make the next move." "And?" Zintra asked, her tone demanding but steady. "We set the trap," Vrykol said, his voice laced with cold resolve. "If this is where they want the fight, we make them regret it." Drevok looked up from his work, his eyes glinting with faint hope. "I've got access to the grid. I can manipulate the power, shut down some sections, reroute others. If they're using these systems, I can force them into specific areas." Vrykol's mandibles twitched in thought, a plan taking shape. "Good. Focus on the central chamber. They'll need to be there if they want to hold this position. We cut off every other route and force them into a kill zone." "And what about us?" Zintra asked, her antennae twitching. "We'll be just as cornered if it goes wrong." "It won't," Vrykol said firmly. "We control the terrain now. They've been using the environment against us. Now it's our turn." Drevok's claws danced over his display, the interface lighting up with intricate blueprints of the structure. "I can seal off these auxiliary corridors," he said, pointing to sections of the map. "But it'll take time, and we'll need to hold them off while I work." Vrykol turned to the rest of the squad, their faces lit by the flickering glow of the conduits. "We split up. Zintra, take 2 soldiers and secure the upper level. Lay down suppressive fire if they try to move above us. Drevok, stay here and keep working. I'll lead the rest through the central chamber and draw them in." Zintra frowned, her sharp features hardening. "You're using yourself as bait." "It's what they're expecting," Vrykol said, a grim smile curling his mandibles. "But this time, they won't see the rest of the trap until it's too late." The squad moved with purpose, their boots striking the metallic floors with quiet determination. Every corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, the faint hum of the conduits casting an unnatural rhythm over their advance. Vrykol's mind raced as he prepared for the inevitable confrontation. The sniper wasn't just skilled, they were patient, methodical. This wouldn't be a straightforward fight. The central chamber loomed ahead, its massive doors sliding open with a low mechanical hiss. The room was vast, a cavern of metal and light. High catwalks crisscrossed overhead, their railings casting long, fractured shadows on the polished floor. The conduits here pulsed brighter, their energy feeding into a central core that thrummed with latent power. "Perfect spot for an ambush," Zintra muttered over the comms, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Exactly," Vrykol replied. "They've been baiting us into their traps. Now we turn it around." He signaled the squad to take up positions, their weapons trained on every possible entry point. Drevok's updates filtered through his heads-up display, showing the progress of the corridor lockdowns. One by one, the routes to the chamber were sealed, leaving only the sniper's probable path open. And then they waited. The silence stretched thin, the only sound the faint crackle of energy coursing through the conduits. Every second felt heavier, the air thick with tension. Vrykol's claws tapped against the grip of his carbine, his amber eyes locked on the open corridor ahead. A faint sound broke the stillness, a soft scuff of boots against metal. The squad tensed, their weapons shifting as they tracked the noise. A shadow moved in the corridor, fleeting and indistinct, but unmistakably human. "Hold," Vrykol ordered, his voice steady. "Wait for my signal." The figure emerged, their movements fluid and deliberate. The sniper was smaller than Vrykol had expected, their form compact and wiry beneath the patchwork armor. Their rifle was slung low, the barrel gleaming faintly in the light. They stopped at the edge of the chamber, their head tilting slightly as if listening. Vrykol's mandibles clicked softly. "They're testing us." The sniper raised their rifle, aiming not at the squad, but at the central core. A single shot rang out, the kinetic round striking a conduit and sending a cascade of sparks raining down. The lights flickered, plunging the chamber into half-shadow. "Now!" Vrykol roared. The squad opened fire, plasma bolts tearing through the darkness. The sniper moved with impossible speed, weaving between the shots as they darted toward the central core. Zintra's team rained suppressive fire from above, but the sniper seemed to anticipate every move, their figure a blur against the chaos. Drevok's voice crackled in Vrykol's ear. "Commander, they're heading for the auxiliary grid. If they hit it, we lose control of the locks." "Not happening," Vrykol growled. He surged forward, his carbine spitting plasma as he closed the distance. The sniper turned, their rifles snapping up to fire, but Vrykol was faster. His shot struck the ground at their feet, forcing them back. The squad pressed in, their coordinated fire pinning the sniper against the core. For the first time, the human hesitated. Vrykol saw it, the split-second decision, the calculation in their eyes. The sniper raised their rifle, aiming not at the squad, but at the core itself. "Take the shot," Zintra shouted from above. Vrykol didn't hesitate. His plasma bolt struck true, the energy slamming into the sniper's shoulder and sending them sprawling. The rifle clattered to the floor, its sound sharp against the metallic chamber. The squad closed in, weapons trained on the downed figure. The sniper looked up, their face partially obscured by a cracked visor. For the first time, Vrykol saw their eyes, sharp, defiant, and utterly human. They said nothing, their gaze meeting his with a mixture of fury and resignation. "This is over," Vrykol said, his voice cold. But the sniper's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. And in that moment, Vrykol knew the game wasn't finished. Not yet. The sniper's faint smile lingered as they lay slumped against the base of the core, their visor fractured, revealing a trickle of blood tracing a line down their temple. Vrykol's squad surrounded them, weapons trained, every muscle coiled like a spring. The air felt charged, the faint hum of the energy conduits pulsing beneath the silence like a heartbeat. Vrykol stepped forward, his amber eyes locked on the sniper. The human didn't flinch, their gaze meeting his with unyielding defiance. Despite the wound on their shoulder and the smoldering remains of their rifle on the floor, they exuded an unshakable calm, as if the outcome of this confrontation had already been decided. "You've lost," Vrykol said, his voice low but cutting. His claws tightened on his carbine, the weight of this moment pressing heavily against his chest. "Surrender now, and this ends here." The sniper's smile widened, though pain shadowed their features. When they spoke, their voice was steady, quiet, and laced with something deeper than fear, something Vrykol couldn't place. "You think this is about winning or losing?" Zintra stepped closer, her weapon still aimed. "They're stalling, Commander. Whatever they've got planned, we need to act now." But Vrykol held up a hand, silencing her. He could feel it, the weight of something larger looming over this moment. This wasn't just defiance. It was conviction. "Explain," he demanded, his voice sharper now. "If this isn't about winning, then what is it?" The sniper exhaled slowly, their uninjured hand brushing against the floor. "It's about reminding you what humans are capable of," they said. Their voice carried no arrogance, only certainty. "You think you understand us because you've fought us before. You think we're weak because we lack your technology, your biology, your centuries of conquest. But you don't understand the one thing that makes us different." Vrykol's mandibles twitched, his instincts screaming at him to end this, and yet he found himself drawn in, compelled to listen. "Enlighten me," he said coldly. The sniper's eyes burned with quiet intensity. "Adaptation. Not just surviving. We reshape the fight, the rules, the battlefield itself. You've been chasing me, thinking you could outgun or outthink me. But you missed the point. This wasn't about me versus you. It was about showing you that every time you adapt, we'll go further." The words hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Vrykol glanced at the damaged core behind them, its faint glow flickering as the power grid faltered. His mind raced. The sniper's movements, their attacks, even their retreat. It had all been part of a calculated narrative, one designed to teach a lesson he hadn't yet grasped. "You sacrificed yourself for this?" he asked, his voice hardening. "To make a point?" The sniper laughed softly, a sound tinged with exhaustion but free of regret. "Sacrifice? You still don't see it. This isn't a loss for me, it's a victory for us. Because now you'll remember. You'll carry this fear, this understanding of what humans are, back to your people." "Enough!" Zintra snapped, her talons tightening on her weapon. "They're baiting us, Commander. Let me end this." "No," Vrykol said, his voice sharp enough to halt her in her tracks. He stared down at the human, their words gnawing at the edges of his mind. "What happens if I kill you right now? What does this change?" The sniper's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "If you kill me, you'll have your victory, but you'll never forget the cost. You'll carry this moment with you, and so will your soldiers. And the next time you see humans, you'll hesitate. Because deep down, you'll know you're not just fighting a species. You're fighting an idea. And ideas don't die." The chamber seemed to close in around them, the weight of the sniper's words pressing down like an unseen force. Vrykol's claws flexed against his weapon, his instincts at war with his logic. The human was unarmed, wounded, and surrounded. There was no strategic reason to hesitate. And yet, something inside him recoiled at the thought of pulling the trigger. "You've got nothing left," he said, his voice quieter now. "No reinforcements, no weapon, no escape. What makes you think this lesson of yours matters?" The sniper's smile returned, faint but unyielding. "Because you'll carry it forward. You, your squad, your commanders. You'll speak of this day, and your people will remember. You'll remember the sniper who outlasted you, who turned your strengths against you. And you'll realize that no matter how many battles you win, humanity will always find a way." Vrykol's mandibles twitched, his thoughts spinning. The sniper's words weren't just defiance, they were truth. He could see it in the faces of his soldiers, the way their weapons shook slightly in their hands, the way their eyes flicked between him and the human. They were already carrying the lesson, already questioning what they thought they knew. "Commander," Zintra said, her voice softer now. "What's the order?" Vrykol stared at the sniper, his carbine heavy in his grip. The human's gaze never wavered, even as their strength clearly faltered. In that moment, Vrykol saw not just an enemy, but a reflection, a being willing to die for an idea that would outlive them. It wasn't weakness. It was something far more dangerous. He lowered his weapon. "Take them alive," he ordered, his voice firm but devoid of triumph. "They'll answer for what they've done, but we'll carry this lesson back with us." Zintra hesitated, her antennae twitching in surprise. "Commander, are you sure?" "Do it!" Vrykol snapped, cutting her off. His gaze never left the sniper. And make sure they survive. Their story isn't over. The squad moved in, securing the human with care. The sniper didn't resist, their expression unreadable but calm. As they were lifted to their feet, their eyes met Vrykol's one last time. You made the right choice, they said softly. But don't forget this moment, because next time you won't have the luxury of hesitation. Vrykol didn't respond, his mind already racing with the implications of what had transpired. As the squad began their ascent out of the canyon, the chamber behind them fading into darkness, he felt the weight of the sniper's words settling deep within him. The sniper wasn't just a soldier. They were a messenger, a living reminder of humanity's relentless adaptability and its refusal to be conquered. And as Vrykol led his squad back toward their ship, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would pray his people never encountered another human sniper.